everyone. We're live now from the Jakarta Biennale YouTube. I'm Parawardani. I'm the program director of the Jakarta Biennale 2021 ESOK on behalf of the Visual Arts Committee of Jakarta Arts Council. I'm most happiest now to present you this curatorial program that just starting like last month, initiated by the fabulous curators of the JB ESOK themselves is Ms. Chingy Lim, Sally Taksania, and Grace Sambo. And also that we invite I would like to say thank you as well to Sid Perez and Michelle Wong, who have taken their time to help us for our initiative of our blog, the curatorial blog that you can check out at blog.jakartabiennale.id, which will be updated every week. So please visit. And this is our first conversation series to kick off the curatorial program. It's actually for everyone to get update of the curatorial process and also like the thoughts exchanges that have and the dialogues about ESOK that have been actually have been brewed by the curators since last year. And we hope to see you in this road to Jakarta Biennale that will be end of this year. We will announce the commencement soon. So that's from me. Please enjoy the talk, and I hand over to the curatorial ladies. Please do.
Thank you, Mbak Wawa, for the introduction. Hello, my name is Chita, and I am the curatorial assistant of the Jakarta Biennale, together with Rachel, who is also here.
Hello.
Hello. So, welcome to the first. Thank you. We would like to thank you for joining us this afternoon of the first iteration of our monthly event program. Welcome.
Since this is the first event of the program, I just would like to say a little bit about what JB2021 ESOK monthly event is. So this platform is run by the curatorial team as a way to expand and share our ideas, thoughts, and process of working towards making JB2021 ESOK happen with all of you and in general with everyone outside of our little bubble here. To begin with, as you can see you should see on your screen now, is the title of our event this afternoon. We have here with us today the curators, Mbak Grace Sambo, Mbak Sally Taksania, and Mbak Chingy Lim, as well as the blog editors, Sid Perez and Michelle Wong, to host our Selamatan or celebration of us kicking things off. That's why we're sitting on the ground now. It's more like a celebration. I think I want to keep this short. So Sid and Michelle, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sid Perez, and I'm one of the collaborators to work on this blog and to continue the conversation, at least to unpack certain things, certain themes that the three curators, Chingy, Grace, and Sally, are working through as we go on this journey to Jakarta Biennale. So yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm also a curator, and I'm currently based in Singapore. And my affiliation is with the National University of Singapore Museum. And I'm also half of the platform Planting Rice. And I guess in saying that, I also then would like to move on to reintroduce the three curators, Grace Sambo, Sally Taksania, and Chingy Lim. I understand that we may know a lot about them as peers and also as people who have done so much work in the different communities that we're all circulating in, but just to somehow reiterate and kind of give credit to the wonderful projects and institution affiliations that they've had. Yeah, I'm just gonna go and say that, for instance, Grace lives amongst different cities. She lives and works in Jogja, Jatiwangi, Jakarta, and Medan. And she believes that curating is about understanding and making at the same time. She jigs within existing elements of the art scene around her. So, for instance, with Juniap Gritia Gawi Wong and Anna Katharina Gebers, she is curating Collecting Entanglements and Embodied Histories, a joint venture between Gallery Nasional Indonesia, Mayam Contemporary Art Museum, Singapore Art Museum, National Gallery, Staatlich Museum zu Berlin, and Goethe Institute. This is also running from this year to next year. So she's attached to Hyphen. She's affiliated to Rabana Underground Hub, and she writes this herself. She's struggling for her doctoral thesis at Arts and Society Studies at the Sanata Dharma University. And the next curator that I'd like to introduce is Sally Taksania. She's an independent curator based in Jakarta, Indonesia. She earned her bachelor's degree from the Faculty of Art and Design at the Bandung Institute of Technology in 2009, and her master's from the Faculty of International Relations at the University of Indonesia in 2012. So Sally served as head of Ciputra Artpreneur Museum for 2 years from 2014 to 2016, and her past curatorial works includes the collection exhibition of Ciputra Artpreneur Museum, Sinandung Ibu Pertiwi Art Collection of Presidential Palace of Indonesia, and the new narrative of Museum of Fine Art and Ceramics, Jakarta. And next, I'd like to introduce Chini. So she is a curator at the National Gallery Singapore. She completed the Apple curatorial program in Amsterdam in 2012 and holds a master's in Southeast Asian Studies from the National University of Singapore. So Chini's research interests look at epistemological conundrums and transhistorical dilemmas posed by the different modes of post and decolonization. Chini previously held curatorial positions at Parasite in Hong Kong, Singapore Art Museum, and NUS Museum, Singapore. So she is an alumni to my current work affiliation. Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself? Or
I would.
Yes.
And I'll run down a little bit of maybe some steps of motions that we might go through later in a little bit. Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Wong. I say hello from Hong Kong. I'm currently, I'm a writer, researcher that for the past 8 years until quite recently was with Asia Art Archive, but I've now very happily moved on to do other stuff and to work with friends asking very many different questions, and feel very lucky and privileged to be working with these ladies here. I also have a very messed up conception of time that I'm always trying to just navigate and figure out. But today, in the next hour and a half to 2 hours or so, what we plan to do is to talk through with everyone some of the questions and discussion that Sid, Grace, Chini, Sally, and myself have been starting to navigate through, thinking about ESOK and curating and working on a biennial in this day and age. And what we'll go through is some very informal questions and discussion. And we welcome audiences at various platforms to type in your questions, and we'll try to harvest them and address them as we go as well. So with that, we can start. Do we have any questions in particular that we would like to start by saying? Or perhaps one of the things that we can do is to, I'm recalling that conversation from last week when a few of us sat down together thinking about what does it mean to be working on a biennial in this age of a pandemic, or when everyone is at different places. And Grace sort of articulated something very, very nicely, is that she sees the biennial as a form, or as a platform that gives forms to the different concerns that you guys as curators have. And I thought maybe we can start from that, you know, Grace, Sally, or Chinyi, however you would like to, in whichever order. You know, why have you decided to work on a biennial at this sort of moment, and what are your hopes in some ways of the biennial giving form to your concerns? What kind of concerns and what kind of forms do you want it to sort of become, or how you would like to shape them? Jinyi, would you like to start?
To say the least, our conversations actually predate the pandemic. Like initially, it was a very kind invitation from Farah Wadani herself back in December 2019. I think it feels weird because 2020 nearly never ever really exists in my mind frame. And I think at a point of time, there were different anxieties, like, you know, the idea of, like, you know, what a post 1989 Biennale would be, and what does it, of course, like this idea of an international platform in Jakarta itself as well. But then after that, the pandemic came down, and we were like struck by it, like caught in the mix of it, like in between time, space. Like the last time that I was in Jakarta was in January 2020, and 3 weeks after, that was when everything just went. That's, you know, gone to well, hell. And ever since, we've just been communicating over like internet. Like Grace is in Jogja, Sally's in Jakarta, and many different members of our team are just like here and there. So like actually trying to form an idea of an exhibition in terms of a physical entity has been quite a challenge. But then again, conceptually, that also allows us as individuals to actually have different voices and to actually think about what it means to us, like given the thematics and the directions of what ESOK is. Like Grace translates it as, Lucy translates it from Bahasa as tomorrow. I translate it as what is to be. But that's also like, I think like part of my perspective as to like how Singapore also looks at the future, like, you know, what it has to be and will come to be. Yeah. Sally?
Yeah, well, working in a Biennale is a new experience. We said okay before the pandemic hit, actually. But along this journey, there were instances of, to me, it's a lot of breaking and adjusting view that I previously had, which were only made possible by conversation with my colleagues. So along this journey, it's not only about making an exhibition in the middle of crisis, but it's also about it's about learning how to make spaces for different realities and different existence. Maybe Grace would like to add about it.
I think sometimes I feel like I'm someone who like question things too much and enjoy questioning things. And when you think of a biennial, there is always this rigidity or a very fixed idea that it will be a mega show. And at least since, I don't know, 90s or whatever you want to pin down as like landmark, there is kind of like a demand for it to be like bigger than the previous ones that are being held, be it in its own history of the biennial or in like a larger sort of biennial or periodical art events. And in terms of the, I don't know, what do we want to call it? Like the grandness of biennial, I guess is impossible to avoid. But I feel like there is this opportunity to approach the granderness differently. Like it will be hard work for so many people, but maybe the hard work doesn't need to end in the exhibition. And I guess if we go back to what Michelle was saying, giving form to concerns, there are quite a number of practices around us that have been around for so long, have changed, have developed, have died, or have rebirthed. And exhibition was that never treated exhibition as their end result. So I think that is that is a big part of my concern. How do we work through these things, these questions? And I'm not saying I'm against exhibition or anti, exhibitions. Just try to see or treat or deal with exhibition differently or more flexibly.
I mean, and in some ways you guys have started to do that sort of by actually not starting with an exhibitionary form, but actually start by addressing one another through letters. And can you guys tell us a little bit about, how that letter came about? I'm trying to tease that out now. And, why the form of a letter writing? And for those of you who are watching, these letters are actually published on the blog at the moment. So then you can actually see how these ladies have been talking through these things. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about those letters?
Okay.
And actually, one more thing, what kind of space does a letter form have afforded you guys? I'm interested to know sort of how the letter as a space have stretched certain ways of working for you guys as well.
I think the letter form is a very personal kind of format, right? It's definitely like the celebration of the individual, celebration of the individual's voice on, some would say, intimate kind of context, in the way that it's being written. It's addressed to like all of us from one of us. And in that sense, that came around us, I think interestingly enough, because we were trying to form a curatorial text that would somehow be a unified voice. And we were sort of editing this one document, and I guess like there was like quite a bit of like frustration, or even like trying to get to know each other. Like, where do you sit? How do we talk about it? What's your position about something, even to think about tomorrow? Like, Grace was. So one of the things that we went back to looking in terms of a letter was also like just thinking about like how Biennales usually comes to be, where the curatorial team also like usually release a unified note talking about like the team and like a unified stance. But for us, because we come from different cities, and we are in the middle of a pandemic where like there are limitations to travel, to kind of understanding, and to even like come from different social contexts. We thought the best way to do was to actually use the letter format itself to address from our own individual positions, and also to tackle the notion of what is tomorrow and what is to come. I think in the three letters, you will also see our different positionality when it comes to me. Like my letter kind of deals like the question of what does it mean to deal with like things like radical social change or human rights or the tonality that happens, like what about the liminal spaces that happen in between, and what do we think about in terms of hegemonies that are constructed through terms such as human rights itself. Yeah.
Adding to Ching-yi, the how to say that, and also to Michelle, stretch is pretty much the keyword of this letter, because again, we have to make a lot of possibilities of how people looking into activism. Maybe because not everybody is activist, so it aims to accommodate different stages of experiencing and learning about itself, or even in regards to other people. So the letter is made based pretty much on understanding that the problems that faced by and confronting different peoples are not the same. So we are trying to stretch the spectrums.
Yeah, I was thinking about this whole letter writing process because it somehow also reveals as a form that you all are writing beyond geographic locations. So there's also this sense of trying to speak to one another in a metaphorical kind of remoteness, right? And beyond even as well, this whole virtual interface. This is when things start getting positioned. Because I thought it was interesting, because I'm not sure, I wanted to ask if there is an order to these letters, because the published letters in the Jakarta Biennale blog, you guys wrote it in different times. What did that mean? Like, were things kind of germinating? Were somebody else sitting through what another said, or was that kind of a crystallization of different points? When you guys were trying to figure out or coming together as a team. I mean, it sounds pretty big, but yeah, just kind of still more about the letter writing. It's just me ruminating on that form that you guys took.
Can I? I think maybe it comes rather naturally, I have to say, in the sense that we weren't sort of like planning or making schemes of like, okay, so these are the things that we wanted to do. There was no, it wasn't planned in that way. It was because, like Chini mentioned, in the beginning we tried to sort of deal with one text, but then it becomes impossible because the text eventually doesn't. Who is it for? Whose voice is that? And it's Bibi's voice. And is one voice the kind of way that we wanted it to be out? Can we render everything the same? Can we, or are we trying to work with people that speaks in the same tone? And there is that limitation with like one text. So I think we sort of, it was a discussion between us initially, but then we thought that it would be nice to also share the process, that we are navigating the disagreements or the differences from where we are coming from. So I think the letter format, the letter format came in because of that. It becomes like some sort of a convenience to talk amongst ourselves first. But also we do not have plans, like whether we will change the tone or not in the coming days.
I was thinking, you were saying that the letter form sort of affords you the space and the time to then tease out agreements and disagreements. And I think that's a really nice way of sort of thinking through that. And what are the things that you agreed on, or what are the things that you disagreed on? Chinny said a little bit about it already. Even just the notion of tomorrow means a little different, depends on where you are, how you think. And I think this is something that can be very, very productive. Just like how, depending on where you are on Java or somewhere else, how you orient yourself in terms of direction can depend on whether you have a volcano or not. Singapore has no volcano. Hong Kong has no volcano. So I'm really curious to hear more about what are some of these disagreements? And I think, I'm also reminded of Wang Choi, who says, friends of disagreements are something that are very rare to come by. And so, if you guys can also share a little bit of that, I think that would be really lovely.
I don't think we disagree with each other explicitly, but like we do have like some common sense, like when we were looking at the Biennale itself, like questions about the politics versus the political, what we're interested in inherently. Like for me, looking at strategies of intervention, for example, is something that's like very much key, and also the question of how we frame things. I think one of like my letter was the last to be released, and actually was reworked upon twice, because the first version was didn't really suit me. But like over relooking at it, I kind of came to like finding two texts that actually worked for me, because they also kind of represented a growth in the scholar who wrote them over a period of 10 years. And that was also kind of interesting to see that growth and that constructiveness move forward. I think I think like it's one of those key texts, Under Westernized, by Chandra Mohanty. And it's also like how she drops about it, like talking about the language that we frame feminism in, and like how we look in terms of total feminism to Western feminism, and what the language actually occurs. And that also like got me thinking, because, well, I'm in Singapore, which is one of the most neoliberal capitalist capital that's going on, and how am I to talk about like curating a show on radical social change in Jakarta, for example? And what does that mean in terms of a curatorial gesture? Because like that like the COVID situation has also like kind of put questions into the spotlight, like parachuting curators like into Biennale, which is something of a conundrum that we see quite often. And because of the pandemic, I am forced to inhabit that role due to travel limitations and understanding. Yeah. But working with Grace and Sally has been great, because like talking to them, it's just like, I'm not sure. It's like, it's also a confession of being vulnerable, and also a question about being humble to say that I don't know everything, but like, can I talk to you guys? Can I consult with you with regards to this and that, and what does it mean, in different contexts? Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I'll try to answer the question. So the letter was made during the, how to say, formative period. Because on those period, like I'm already used to use the same text and context over and over again. So when how to say, plunging into the Jakarta Biennale, it's already an effort to break previous preliminary concept in my head anyway. So yeah, but I think for now I can't answer it yet, whether it's already moved to different direction. But I think this letter will give a view on the initial stage we were in, that we were in such a, how to say, in a way, a different position to the Biennale proposition at that moment.
I didn't quite get the question. I caught the part with volcano and, and the different geographies. Can you like rephrase a bit, Michelle? Sorry.
Come again?
Can you rephrase a bit? I kind of miss it because of the barks.
No, I was thinking I'm interested to know how the letter as a form has afforded you the space to think about where you are and how you relate to Sally and Chinny and I guess the wider world, and also exhibition making as a form. Like, has the letter form been one that has helped you to process some of these things, or how do you sort of hope that this letter form writing can help you harness some of these energies? And I guess to push it a little further, how do you see, and there may be no answer to this, it's like, how do you see these kind of conversations making their way to the exhibitionary, if at all, or maybe it won't?
Maybe it won't. There is this slowness of like letter reply that is also enjoyable, I think, because as we were talking about, the letter was written in different times. It started with the idea that let's do it, let's write it, and let's publish it. But because too many things were uncertain, especially last year, so we didn't really do the publication that was planned. I sort of finished mine, and it's not about not wanting to revisit the text when we finally agreed on the blog as a form to distribute it. But I thought it's okay to sort of, it can be a way to show thinking process. I guess in the coming days, I'm not sure that I have changed in that short period of time, but I've learned a lot from the process, from Chin, from how Sally is approaching things, from how Farah and Lolo navigate the Jakarta as like the jungle of concrete. And I'm sure it has sort of like found a way or sit in my head, and the way I talk to the people that we are slowly involving in the pioneer, and will somehow I don't know, it documents the process in a more intimate way, I guess, these forms. And we like, it's not for public display of affection kind of purposes, but we'd like to share this intimacy, because in that way we can we can be safe with knowing that everyone has vulnerabilities in the processes. That there is of course this assumption in Farah's recent letter. She was addressing this, the assumption that the Biennale is an institution, that it operates in a manner, and that we, I don't think we have the energy to sort of like change that kind of institution, but we, I think by far we would like to say that we would like to work in a manner that doesn't necessarily have to reflect this mega power kind of structure. So I don't know if that answers. But the volcano is mega for sure.
It's a. I guess I'm also trying to read or translate Michelle's question. Is this interesting? You know what we call positionality, right, or posturing. But then with your letters, what it shows is that you're addressing the different orientations. And I guess even with the whole volcano conversation too with Michelle, like where you're where one is orientated, depends on where they are, you know, which proximity volcano that's close by. And this address, this three letters from the curators, and later on Ibu Dolorosa and Para coming through, it does set the stage for that kind of intimacy of just trying to find also meaning together. And I know Chini and Sally also expressed what were the inquiries that they brought on when they were asked to partake in the team. But what other, maybe I'm curious, what other kind of convergences you found, you know, with each other's specific orientations? Besides also the serendipitous kind of find of a book, you know, like you guys always talk about a text, but a different text. I almost wonder if you guys read that text that the other curators found, just to find a mode of convergence or something else. I find that it recurs, you know, in all of your letters. Like, oh, I got into this book, or yeah. Does that reveal also your posture to things, to being part of the team?
Short answer. So this is pretty much the process of identifying togetherness on and on and on again. So we just have different methods. Before it was letters, after it's readings, the readings that, read by Grace or Ching Yi, or looking into Kat's Instagram as part of it. You know, it's just really a way to identify this togetherness, because again, like I guess it was in our last conversation, sometimes it feels like a blind date. For example, Kiki and I never really meet in person.
We still haven't.
Yeah. After this, yeah. So
yeah.
it's just a process of finding the togetherness, finding way to work together. I don't know its answers or not. Maybe Chingy or Grace wants to add.
I think it's about like finding trust as well. Like, you know, instead of naming and providing our references, and sharing our references, for example, there's also a sort of an action of trust to each other. It's like, hey, I read this is interesting. And, you know, this is, you know, you mentioned positionality and geography. And it's also like something to kind of like, we've started doing that in the very, very early days, in the middle of the lockdown, because there wasn't anything else to talk about, because we couldn't, you know, in the early days of last year, there was no way that we could have been able to think about a biennale or an exhibition. And after a few weeks of trying to hammer something out, we just gave up and we just started talking about things that we like, things that we find interesting to share with each other. You know, other than references, there's also like, you know, things like our pets, you know, food, and various different things that we wanted to do. And that was also like how we came around with the blog, because like sort of an electronic international platform. Because the letters were initially supposed to be released as zines, to the local public itself, And then after COVID started kicking in, we were thinking it's like, how would be the fastest, maybe the fastest and most transparent way of getting our voices out in a time where the circumstances keep fluctuating. You see, the limitations keep changing. And so we thought of having the blog as a way of establishing like conversations and sharing, and sort of also sharing our references as well between the three of us to sort of make it a bit more, you know, I don't like to use the word organic, but like more natural way in the time, you know, of sharing. Yeah. And that's how we were. Yeah. Conviviality.
You brought that up. I think that really also not to avoid the word organic, but I think it shows, I hope it can also demonstrate it, like the convergences. Like for many of us, this is English is not our mother tongue, so it's very limited to express, to use it to express, and I think I care less and less if I'm speaking good English or not. Like, but yeah, what the slow process of letter, and also the fact that we cannot sit together, that we had to do things slowly over time. And I mean, how long would you stay in Zoom anyway, or in whatever kind of online meeting platform, as opposed to the way things were done before, where you would travel and gather for like a week at max, at best. Then you would like separate again. This sort of like slowness or slow cooking allows like convergence to be more apparent, I guess. More apparent.
I mean, the amount of time we spend in conversation is nearly becoming sort of a habit or a ritual, a weekly ritual or habit, and or even on a you know, sometimes in a more immediate basis, through means of WhatsApp and things like that. But in terms of deep conversation, there are always, you know, it was a very slow growing period of time because it was the pandemic, it was a lockdown. There wasn't anything that we could do in terms of mobility except for reach for, like, you know, what we had within our own homes and what we could find on the internet. And that also like where we came to talk about it. But in the spirit of that, I think like Farah's note, she also like addresses the notion of conviviality as the spirit of how she actually started the Jakarta Biennale, this iteration 2021, which is true because like in some ways her invitation came to each of us in terms of a personal invitation, not an institutional by any means. And it was sort of a very interesting divide that she was trying to make in her note itself, where she doesn't see conviviality as, you know, something derogatory or stereotypical, but actually something in that spirit that we operate in. Yeah.
How do I say this? Let me try to turn something and flip it over. In that, you know, often in this sort of pandemic situation, people speak of the lack or the inabilities to travel and whatnot. And I was just having this thought that actually, you know, for better or for worse, we actually go further. Because by choice, you choose to converse with one another. And it's, you know, even if it's sort of with a screen and whatnot, but I feel that there is a different investment and a different commitment to each other's minds and worlds, precisely because of the physical limitations that are being imposed at the moment. And that, in a strange way for me, is very promising, in that I think new ways of working with one another, working with art, working with making will come out. And it is something that will change how we sort of epistemologically experience and think about things. And for me personally, just listening to you guys talk and also having other sort of projects going on, that it is something that a lot of people are working with and working along together. And in a very cheesy way, it moves me very much. I think there is so much that in some ways to look forward to in the many tomorrows, which may be in very many different forms. And I feel very lucky to actually be part of these conversations and be part of this making. And the conviviality, it's a very slow one, it feels. Another metaphor, since I'm the metaphor lady now, that we use a lot is that of sugar, right? Whether it is a form of raw sugar that you cook for a long time, or that takes a different form of crystal, to sort of these sort of artificial sugars that gives you a high, but that explodes and that's it. I think, we've decided we are in the business of jaggery making, or we've made our choice to consume or be part of a different kind of energy release. That's not a question.
Yeah, I'm like, are you advocating alcohol consumption here?
Well, why alcohol? Why would we go to alcohol though? When we have broth and jaggery, why would we want alcohol?
Well, we haven't really spoken about broth per se.
And this is another question that I actually do have. We've spoken a little bit about, in the institution of biennial making and sort of the difficulties or challenges that we've been facing. But I feel like if I can ask, sorry. Oh, okay. What was I thinking? I was curious to know, in your conversations, how have sort of practices or art come into conversation, or what is the location and position of all of these things in your very many conversations, and how do you see that coming in and out?
To be very honest, it has been more about navigating things. And when it comes to like art per se, or forms, or practices, we somehow, can I use the word trust, Chini? Like, or rely on each other's takes. Trust, is that a bad word?
No.
Okay. So because that's how I feel. I'm very afraid with the word feel, but that's how I sort of have been like, how have we been talking about these people or about practices that we're interested in? I think we correct me if I'm wrong, Chini or Sally, but I think we've been listening to each other and learning how each other look at the different practices, rather than contesting, for example, or I don't know. Yeah.
I think to pick up on Grace's notion is like this trust is kind of important that we have, given especially times like that. The other thing to think about is also acknowledging that each of us have a very different vision as to what a Biennale, what tomorrow should be. So that's also that level of like, I guess the metaphor would be like, you know, that letter writing thing that we talked about, you know, how we tried to write one text and then we just ended up like really not really understanding each other's positionality, but in which like this trust, that also helped us like understand where each other came from. And that's also where we started talking about artist practice, questions that we're interested in, and inherently like questions about our own curatorial principles actually came to be, like through arguments or discussions with other people. And it was very interesting to listen to Sally and Grace to hear like where they were coming from, or where, you know, where our stance could be in that sense. At this point of time, we're just trying to work with each other, trying to see how we can help each other as well, like in many ways. Yeah, like we're a small team, so it's how we move. Yeah.
There's also this like, sorry, Sally, you can go first, maybe.
No, we always say that curating is always about learning by doing process. But then suddenly it's not that special anymore, because we see daily life and even work system deals with constant changes, improvisation, and, you know, uncertainties. Like today, a process-based practice is pretty much daily life. It's not merely an art practice. So maybe from my end, today a process-based practices would be more relevant, as the notion of ever-changing process is now common anyway, you know, so it is more accessible and possible to engage in this kind of practice that deal with process. So it's not gonna be that conceptual anymore for the audience. But this is still a vague assumption about how the reception of the Biennale would be. Does it answer?
Pretty ancient, Michelle. I mean, forms feel pretty ancient now. I think all of us have different like fascinations towards forms, or forms of practices, not necessarily forms of art.
Forms of thinking.
Forms of thinking, also strategies, as Timmy puts it. But we can only look at what the practices, the people with these practices that we are looking at or that we are sharing to each other. That's, in a way, it's all in the past. Everything has to change now. I think for quite a long time, we were also avoiding to talk about the pandemic. Not that we don't want to confront it, but it's just we are aware that everyone is experiencing it differently, and also maybe we don't really know if we are talking about it, are we adding to the problem? And so we were sharing about the practices of artists or group or whoever we're interested in the past tense, while hoping, expecting, or I don't know, waiting anxiously to see how these people work or sustain their practice under the current situation?
I mean, the current situation of the COVID is, I feel like personally, so like sometimes that we talk that part of this semi avoidance is also the fact that it's still present and it's still current and it's still in a flux for us, and it's just something that it's not something really to be historicized at this current moment, or what is to happen even in November, because we don't even know what happens, by the end of the year or like next year or the year after, like at this point of time. All we see, in the daily news are strategies as to like how people are trying to move through like the restrictions that COVID has imposed on them. Like in Germany they speak of vaccine passports or things like that. These are conceptual strategies, and they are slowly boiling out itself into physical manifestation. And for us, then the question is like inherently the questions of class and privilege or societal, discrimination, gender discrimination are still going to boil up underneath these strategies, and therefore like it's going to be prevalent there. Whether or not we are going to address it, it's going to be part of the environment through that lens that people will read the artist and their art practice through. But like it's not something that we feel we need to address. Yeah. It's like broth. Broth is often
say more.
It's like broth, like it accompanies like ramen noodles, and together with an egg and like that slice of pork. Like it's the general condiment at the bottom of any ramen dish.
So do you stir or not?
Do you add butter to it? I think that's the question.
I would drink the broth first before I stir.
1 spoon.
Or maybe a bit more.
What I'm hearing a little bit is also this, it seems paradoxical to talk about tomorrow today.
Oh yeah.
I like, yeah. I'm just caught by this paradox.
It's also unavoidable. In the early times of the pandemic, people were hoping that it will end. Like everyone has different timelines of when it will end, but precisely last year, we wouldn't imagine that we would stay where we are for a year and not move around. So yeah, I guess I was just going to add that it's impossible to not talk about when we can sit together again, when we can hang out again, and all that. But after a year, I guess your body has accepted it, that here's how you're gonna make friends, or here's how you're gonna hang out with your closest circle. It's for some people, it's literally too dangerous to go out. So yeah.
I mean, we never know when we're going to sit down again. That's really something. The last time that I left Grace was like when we were at some izakaya in Jakarta with Farah herself, and that was the last time that we even had a meal together. And I mean, to think about it, like to think about tomorrow, today, is a bit of the conundrum as well. But then again, I also, because I tried looking up again, like I'm a bit of a nerd, as you all know. And there's also like this saying of like, whatever all that has happened before will happen again. And of course, like I'm quoting directly out of Battlestar Galactica again. But also like looking at this whole pattern that has happened, because if we were to think about this as a pandemic, historically there has been pandemics before, but not, but in terms of a localized scale, that also has been transferred to different areas of the world, but never really like spoken about, in the 20th century. Like we had issues previously of plague, like death and things of that happening, but this happening now within our own time and our own generation, where we are not prepared, or this idea of unearthing, destabilizing the defenses that we had really built up or so-called developed together with the modernized nation. It's just interesting. It's a moment of it's a crack, it's a rupture to think about it.
Mm.
Can we ask a question to both of you, Michelle and Sid?
Mm.
Other than the fact that we are all friends, what made you, what challenged you to sort of work to work with us, to collaborate with us?
Grace, you're asking what sort of challenges you think we are facing up against?
Just wondering, like, why, amidst of everything that all of you have to do, on be it practical or just mundane stuff, why did you say yes to this venture or this journey?
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because as I was listening to the three of you talk, and this paints this picture of a team, a group of friends, a group of peers finding meaning together in a certain kind of model, format, or even legacy that perhaps we can question as whether it's, is it a necessity, or is it a irresponsibility at a time like this? Or if it is not, if it is something else, what then? So I guess it's also the same thing, like here we are also trying to find meaning together. So that's both for me a challenge and something to be excited about. They're all kind of conflated into one thing. How then do we stay and keep relating to one another beyond all these differences and convergences? It's almost like a space where we could reorient ourselves in a kind of world that's a little, well, not a little, but really unfamiliar at the moment. I guess that's just more of how I'm thinking through about this, for sure. Yeah, to begin with, that's what I'm thinking about.
For me, I've always wanted to just work with friends. It's a great training. It's a great way of, because I've always learned from friends, in terms of from practices. And I think this is for people, for some of us who've decided that creative practice is part of the life that we want to be part of. The most, you end up learning from your friends, and you end up becoming friends with the people who you learn from. And I think this is what made the invitation very attractive, in spite of sort of near impossible time to begin with. And then you see what your friends do for you, is that they will counter propose things for you that make time possible. For Sid and I appreciate that. I think there are distances that you go for friends in this way. And in these kind of situations, I also see this as a way of seasoning your tools. We all have different sets of tools, and an opportunity to work with people like one another is a great way to season your wok or to sharpen your knife. And I think that is one of the reasons that I'm interested in. And also I see for platforms like Biennales, and with the practices that we all bring with, what will come for sure are these sort of multiplication of invitations. We will by default make work for one another, make space for one another. And it's a form and it's a way of working that it's interested to be part of, and to sort of expand it that way.
I like that you brought learning and friendship into the conversation, because I was a bit worried. Why are we talking about the pandemic? Yeah, and maybe how do we really how do we talk about friendship actually? Or Michelle was explaining, or was saying that it's you always learn from friends, or you end up being friends with people that you learn from or learn with. I get a lot of questions. What does it mean to work with friends? Or how do you define friends? Or is it a working method, this friendship? I would like to think it's not. The friendship is not a method of working. It's something you aspire. It's something I aspire when I work with people, and trust being one of the keyword, as well as learning. I think I get bored pretty easily if I don't learn anything. Like, if it's a matter of executing bullet points,
Then it becomes transactional, and that's not fun. Yeah.
I think friendship conditions the way that we work, or conditions the ground that we work with. Like, you think about it. Like, far as the invitation, for example, was like a very personal one. It was like, and then, when we first got together, it's like, hey, do you want to do this? And we was like, yeah, why not? I'm not so sure. Okay. I'm not sure that every working relationship that I have will eventually turn out into a friendship. I'm not an optimist in that way, but more of a pragmatist, in acknowledging that. But the trust definitely in so far, like in this Biennale itself, the friendship and the openness, I think, given a sort of understanding of each other's limitations, has been has been quite open, like in all our conversations so far, even though I'm like in Singapore and then like everybody else is like somewhere else. Yeah. Like
I actually find my personal kind of stance with working with friends or friendship as a kind of approach or condition very disruptive. It actually doesn't, I feel like there's too many moving parts, other stuff being involved. It's very disruptive for me, I have to say. But in saying that, it's also one of the most radical thing one can engage on as a creative practitioner, like with all, because of all the things that you guys said, because it does, I think this relationship is not, it's not hard to pin down. I don't think anybody who could define friendship as a model is exactly looking at really the, you know, the whole kind of cosmology around that, the mode of relating, because I think this sort of reason or meaning of friendship and working and being together in intimacy or in solidarity, whatever it is, whatever the foundations are, it does make your limitations very clear. And I think you need then this friendship to be able to let you either go past that or walk with you on that, you know, going past all of these parameters, being able to go a bit further than what's comfortable. Yeah.
I think we are, yeah, we're going to be, I think this is a good note to kind of like mull upon as well, like to think about like how we consider like the working conditions that we work in. Like obviously, like so far, you know, there have been like three very different positions that have been articulated. But at the same time, I think, yeah, there's that thing that, like, you know, working with friends is, of course, you expect to be pushed a bit more, like in terms of comfort level and beyond transactional needs. But and it's definitely a growing process. Yeah. I think we have a message in the chat that's like asking if we have any questions. Please drop the questions in the chat box, and we will start the Q&A soon. So please
I
feel
think
free.
we haven't announced how to ask or how, where, when. Can people ask now or can also not ask?
Chita,
yeah.
would you like to advise our audience?
Yeah, at the moment we don't have any questions yet, but everyone, please, if you have any, please drop the question in the chat box. Also, for those who watch via YouTube, can also drop the question in the chat box on YouTube live.
I guess as we wait for the inquiries, I wonder if the curatorial team is able to give us a sense of what sort of themes, what sort of practices we can look forward to this year. I know, yeah, whatever we can publicize at the moment. Are there any like announcements, things that you're looking forward to? Because I'm sure somebody's gonna ask from the audience.
It's better if we ask.
Yes, it's better it comes from you.
It's like broth, right? So you need to cook that a bit longer before it becomes palatable.
Well, what are you cooking? What are your ingredients? That's what I mean. Tell us about
Okay, what are the
menu.
Yeah, the that maybe makes more sense. Well, as what is now seen on the screen, I think we try to work with friends to begin with, or people that we want to make friends with, or we have been imagining as, or have been our imaginary friend in terms of practice, not ghostly like kind of
imaginary friends.
Yeah. I mean, people with practices that you aspire, or that's sort of like you feel like you learn from it, or I think that's the main ingredient. And unfortunately, by saying that, it means that to know what may be in the biennial means that you have to know our individual practices. That's making you like work the way we work. But we have sort of like along the way, and also in conversation with both of you, Michelle and Sid, we sort of have different articulations on or maybe just different vocabularies on trying to say what we are looking into. Like we are definitely looking into things that will last longer than the biennial. That's what I can say for now.
I think it's looking beyond the Biennale as a physical exhibition, but also like what we can plant seeds to grow to it. The Biennale as a platform often allows for a space of speculation, for a place of open discussion. Like, I see the question in chat boxes like, how do you make new friends and maintain relationships online? I think first off, there's a very healthy, one would need a very healthy dose of humility and respect and openness in conducting such conversations. And that's like how we've been working so far in terms of like reaching out to people that we know or people that we don't, but have really been watching how they work from afar. And I think for us, it's a conversation that we always say that it's just starting, no pressure about it. And let's just talk and see where we can go from here. And that's the approach that we have been like really been working. It's like, we just want to hear from you. Would you like to talk to us? It's from that position that like, would you like to talk to us? Like, we would really love to talk to you. In that sense. It's about planting seeds that we see the Biennale as a platform that actually like fosters, and eventually something will germinate as we move along. Yeah. Like broth, it just needs to cook a bit longer before it thickens and becomes flavorful.
Hopefully not 400 years, like the one that Michelle was talking about, that ramen broth, that legacy
400
ramen
years.
broth.
400 years. Remember she was talking about it?
I've never used like food as metaphor, so I don't know how to think about it in terms of like the exhibition making aspect of the biennial. I've always liked the journey or trip metaphor because in that metaphor I would position the exhibition as a terminal or as a stop, but not the destination. And in like using road as a metaphor, also means that you can meet in like certain junction and decided that you want to hang out first, so you stop somewhere nearby, then go again in like different places. That's how I've been approaching that the exhibition in like a journey as a metaphor. The destination doesn't matter, but it's about the journey itself and who you meet along the way, what you learn with within the journey, with the people you meet, and when you feel the necessity to do a show and there's an urge to exhibit, is another. It's a pause of that process. It's a pause where you get to sort of like take a break from work and see how other people can join or think or see what you do. And also like sort of like Mars to Earth check. Are you doing things that make sense? Or yeah, just that have always been how I see exhibitions. Yeah.
Sally, what's your metaphor?
Well, maybe this one would be more direct in a way, because how to say, along this journey from you guys, I learned that it's a challenge to not treating the exhibition space not as a showroom. So how to say, it's about learning how looking at the exhibited product is a byproduct of an act of working together or even an embryo to future collaboration. This is always the problem. And maybe currently I'm working with several artists dealing with question of history. In the past, the way of presenting working with historical art is to stage a narrative that show a certain, let's say, to show their presence in a point in a time. So it's more like exhibiting a still shot. But now it's a challenge because some of the artists want to expand this interest on history to actually support their vision of the future and also a base of motivation to empower an action within this condition. So we'll see. It's a challenge, but we'll see.
What's your metaphor, Sid?
Actually, I was thinking about this today. I wrote a post on, this is very strange, a bit left of field. I was thinking of a metaphor for moon in Virgo. And and what came to me is still a bit about food, but it's this I feel like this would change as I have more time with you guys as we look into this work together. But at the moment, I think of being able to prepare all of the ingredients, put them all in a pot, and don't open the pot. You know, it almost feels very ritualistic for me. Like, you know, you have to prepare everything, but you have to kind of let it go once it's stewing. So it's a little bit of what I learned actually in cooking good adobo. You don't open the lid because you've done all the work already and just let it happen. So I wonder how that metaphor would come through as we give more time with one another.
My question would be, what's the material of the pot?
Oh, I'm trying to do a Dutch oven now.
Because that would also like condition what's cooking inside in terms of heat and consistency of heat.
Yeah, absolutely. I also realized as to Michelle's prompt earlier about seasoning your tools. I feel encouraged as well to, to feel more comfortable in actually upgrading my tools. I feel like I've been playing with a lot of kiddie cheap tools for a long time. You know, these are not the things that I want to bring out to my friends, right? Yeah.
If that is your metaphor, then I would say that in like 1 year of our conversation, maybe even more, we were talking in like some in really great details about the tools, the materials, the environment for cooking, the which type of wok or which type of pan or I don't know the what kind of oven or what kind of stove that we are going to use rather than the ingredient. I think we sort of like we started with like trusting each other's the ingredients that they came with, or they arrived with.
That's nice.
Does that make sense? Is that true, Chi or Sally?
It's a nice thought. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've been discussing recently like what the ingredients are, but like, it's sort of a belated kind of process. Like instead of it being in the forefront, it's actually something that's been a bit delayed until recently that we're starting to like, okay, how does this work? You know, kind of thing. Yeah. But it's also, you know, one is to say about like cooking and about like putting it into a pot, right? The density of time, like in the last couple of months, has also added to it, like in some ways, like, you know, when you kind of have to like be within a certain one space at one time, and the only furthest place you can reach is in your mental space, for example. And it's sort of like trusting anything you can get from people that you trust, like, or friends, that actually enriches this whole whatever you're cooking, internally, mentally, physically. Yeah. Trusting
Chita and Rachel, you can also ask things or say things, you know.
Yeah, you guys have been watching us for quite a bit.
I've asked questions on the chat, so
Trusting the ingredients.
And Chita asked that, building relationship with other parties. I think you guys answered that. Is there any more coming in?
Not yet.
I must say also, like, part of this whole trusting the ingredients is also like it's also kind of coming to terms, like, within the curatorial team, our own pets that somehow have influenced our work from home situation. Yeah.
On the pets, yeah. Where are they? They're both gone. Kambing and Hugo and Bibi,
Bibi made an appearance.
They're chill now. They're
Chill.
sleeping. They're like, you can work. We'll wait for you to cook for us.
Yeah, and the other one's like snoozing on the sofa. So, like, you know, I was like, I'm done.
So I guess a little bit about, still talking about food, but I think this whole food idea as well came into my headspace when Michelle and I were talking about the blog and what we may be able to do. Do you want to
Yes,
put you in the
please.
spot, Michelle, but all that jaggery and low glycemic index images, metaphor. Yeah,
It's
you
a bit
would
out
say
of hand, right? No, I think maybe it has something to do with the biennial form as we know it is a big buildup and then a boom. I think when Sid and I, when you guys approached us, not to say that we're anti mega exhibitions, they have their place in history and the present day and the future. It's like, is this something that we are able to do? Probably not. And also, so we've been thinking more about a slow release of something that cooks a little slower, that sort of keeps you energized over a longer period of time, and that gives you the possibility of responding to change without feeling that you are in crisis. Because I mean, crisis is constant. It's just like everyday life is a crisis. Come on. So, and we've just dealt with it that way. And I guess this is sort of, and it's actually a metaphor another writer friend of mine had used to say that, just think of jaggery, that it's a block of raw sugar, but it offers so much possibility and there are so many ways of playing with it. And so this is kind of what we've been running with. And that sort of started a lot of different conversations. I'm also interested to sort of think through how the blog, as much as it can afford a slow release, it also offers equal potential for something that's very explosive. I think these are possibilities that as we move forward together is something that there's so much room to play with. I think it's in terms of text and images. It's an interesting way to find forms together. And even across languages. I'm going to go off a tangent again, which is we were talking about how it's paradoxical to talk about. It reminded me that in Chinese, there are no different words for tomorrow or yesterday or the day after. They're just suffixes that you attach to the word day, and that changes what time it is. And this is it has stuck with me, right? 明天好天, that kind of thing. And this sense of time, I think, is also something that would be very interesting in the form of a blog where you can edit and go forward and backward.
It's surprising that we have never talked about time, actually, by far. It's titled ESOK, which literally means tomorrow. It's not used in like the word is not used in like a day-to-day conversation. It's used more in literature. That's why I think if I'm the one who's translating it, I would say that it's a poetic version of tomorrow rather than tomorrow. But we have never actually talked about time, probably because when we were thinking and like discussing things, we're sort of stuck in time. And it's interesting that you brought that up, Michelle. Actually, in Bahasa, and especially or particularly the way it's being used in Java and Malay influenced part of the country. When you say tomorrow or yesterday, that doesn't mean the technically tomorrow, like the day after today, or yesterday is the day after today. When we say, yeah, we were just chatting yesterday, this yesterday is based on your memory, like what's the closest thing in your memory. So yesterday can mean 10 years ago. And also tomorrow can mean like 10 years from now, something like that. In like conversational manner, that's how the word is being, that's the sense of time that people would have. So I guess when you say ESOK, it automatically puts it in some sort of like an imaginary level or a more distant level, because you don't use the word in a day-to-day kind of conversation. It's like tomorrow with terms and conditions in one way to see it.
Yeah, I think like ESOK, like I mean, like having spoken to Ibu Jolo, also like how she spoke about like how it's something to come and something with urgency. I saw it more as a state of being as opposed to time itself, as a question of like, you know, a situation or a circumstance. And that was sort of how I started interpreting and relooking that. Like linguistically, tomorrow has many different ways of thinking. Like, you know, as Michelle raised it in Mandarin, there's very little sense of time and grammatical sense in that way. But you know, it's just like, I think it's also thinking about like, how do you even think about it in terms of practice, like time in terms of practice, because it's not something, you know, how we speak about historicizing the present moment or the future, but like how do you concretize that? It would have been really difficult, I guess. Yeah.
I was also thinking about what Sally was talking about, your practice of, you know, working with these artists or people whose agenda or whose sort of aspiration is to leave a legacy, or when legacy plays a huge role in their tomorrows, but it's actually their past. And, you know, it's something that I relate to very, very personally and deeply as well. And it's an extremely interesting space.
Well, maybe it's legacy would sound big, but sometimes it's a matter of how to move on. So that's a struggle for some artists who has been dealing with history, how to move on, or maybe how to say, the practice could be more transformative in times like this, because again, from now we feel like we don't have time, but with this situation, it's really, the time is really just stretching, you know. So this is how we cope with time. I don't know whether it's answer your question or not.
Do we have any other questions, or what was this the day-to-day?
I could see something.
Rachel and Cheetah have something.
Rachel, just say it out loud.
Yeah, because Chita asked me in personal chat. She asked me what our metaphor would be. I didn't have an answer to that. I was thinking, maybe like fork and spoon, because we're talking about food. Like you can use just a fork, just a spoon, but if you use them both together, the plate will be clean, something like that.
But I told Rachel that we use hands to eat.
But Chita told me that, but we use hand to eat here. So I was like, oh yeah, then that's a bit. Yeah, but I think about time as well. I was thinking, I feel like it's really hard for me to think um, that what's coming is the Biennale. You know? So far, for me, I what's coming is I don't know yet what's coming. You know, it's just day to day how it goes. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like, so I was saying that in saying that I don't know what's coming, but still sometimes I feel like I'm being chased. Like time is running out, but I don't know like what time is running out or who, like no one's chasing me.
I think once we also talk about how it's okay to just live by the day. And I think I'm still in that phase, like I can't really imagine or I can't really think what will be of tomorrow or as of. I think for now, living by the day, yeah, is enough for me. So it's kind of, but I think it's not good if it's coming from me who's working in this.
I think I look forward to hanging out with everyone.
Yeah.
Definitely that.
That's for sure.
This is to MIRC felt. To early 2000s chat room friendship making.
Hey, I've got good friends from those times still.
Yeah, for sure. So it still has its potential to build intimacy.
Yeah, back to food and like hang out. I still miss tempeh. Fresh tempeh.
I wish I could send it to you.
So, yeah. Hey, do we have any other questions or?
No.
If we don't yet have questions, can we ask if Sid and Michelle is willing to share like initial ideas on like what well we were sort of talking about the blog as, but I think we were talking more about the letters, which is the current form, what the blog is, where the blog is currently at. And as I was saying, the letter format was something that came in naturally because we were exchanging with each other and we're sort of taking it slow. Like if one topic or one question or one debate is not sort of finished or concluded in like our routine conversation, we do not push for it to be finished there. We just wait until the next time we meet because we will meet anyway. And then amidst that conversation, we sort of like invited you guys. And, I mean, as a form, blog is pretty recognizable, like what it can achieve, what it can do as a medium, and the sense of like, I guess there's a sense of lightness in also in blog, rather than like, for example, journal or newsletter. There's more freedom in that. But how are you? Can you already share? I mean, Michelle was saying a little bit like what can be done with that form, like to see how images or text can sort of speak maybe differently in that platform. But yeah, what are your initial ideas? even if maybe you both haven't talked about it.
Sid.
Well, yeah, I know it just kind of exposes us and how we're taking our time, which is good. We're still finding the ingredients, to be fair. But there is an ingredient that I am eyeing. I've been thinking a lot about how to include all of the thoughts that you guys have shared with us, whether here in this talk right now or the conversations we've had outside of this event. And what concerns me at the moment is this kind of very broad theme on translatability, and I'm not just talking about linguistically, but just to think about translatability as an approach, right? How we kind of speak together in different orientations. How do kind of the multiple voices or polyvocalness of polyvocality, whatever it is. Sorry, I'm even reading. You see, I'm translating. I'm reading words from my mind and just speaking it. How does that kind of come through? Or even, notions of speaking to not just a public that could be from elsewhere, but also generationally. What does that mean when people speak and address each other from that specific kind of orientation? But in the end, it's also back to the letters. Translatability as a form or even that encounter when one decides to speak to another despite all of this irreducible differences. So I'm thinking through with that, because this is our condition, right? This is our conditions. We don't even have to talk about diversity. We don't even in that form. There's no need to go down that hole, because that rabbit hole, because we understand that this is the circumstances that we're reckoning with. So I feel translatability is an approach could be then fine-tuned to give specific inquiries to the contributors that we're thinking about. And of course, they won't be just contributors where we're commissioning texts, this be further collaborations. Yeah, those are my thoughts. I don't know about the form yet, but you did say, Grace, that like form is less interesting than strategies and approaches. Yeah. Michelle?
On forms, I think forms and strategies can be one and the same, and I'm interested to explore that as one and the same. And yeah, a blog is an excellent way of, like I was saying earlier, multiply invitations and to hear more voices and be together in multiple. And this is what I'm hoping to see. On another sort of register, I've been thinking a lot about the narrative potential of things, whether it's archives or people, food. There are stories that want to be told, or it becomes fascinating when we become people who look for stories, but stories also come to us. And I think when stories layer upon one another, something very interesting happens. So I'm interested in this sort of layering of things, and it's a much wider realm, I feel, that takes you out of the dialectical, out of the argument or the contestations, because narratives in themselves play out contestation sometimes. So this is what I'm interested to sort of see how how we can work with the blog with that while sort of doing that with more people, which may or may actually more protagonists. They may not be people. They may be things. They may be objects.
So Leafy has a question. How to engage people in continual project with intellectual humility rather than discursive framework? Because I sense the artist curator people are not in the same boat or equal agency anymore. Sometimes we are blinded by pretext. What do you guys do when you have to deal with that? Or if these are certain experiences that you are contending with at the moment?
I don't think they are mutually exclusive, actually. Like, if one is to think about a continual project as something that's like long durational, right? And this is my interpretation with regards to the term that's being used. You need to be discursive in one way or another to even approach or open the door for such a project to happen. And
maybe also the way to think about it is, you know, discursivity doesn't mean a lack of affect. You know, a discursive move can also be one that opens up affect.
Like, it's not like a discursive framework does. So a discursive framework has many tonalities in terms of its articulation. Like, you know, you talk about intellectual humility, you talk about the approach and things like that. I think what should be encouraged here shouldn't be a binary or like say something that's like anti-intellectualism or a pretense towards a discursive framework. Like there needs to be a genuine spirit of exchange and making space for each other. Yeah. There's one new message. Yeah. Like, you know, you talk about being blinded by pretext, but I think like pretext probably has to be like elaborated upon. Yeah. Sorry, Grace.
No, it's okay. I just never assumed equality. I never assumed equality in an abstract or even in like on a day-to-day basis. It's not something that I assume we have.
True.
Or I think for me, I always start with acknowledging privileges and disadvantages and of everyone in the conversation, which always makes it hard because you maybe it's easier if it's peers, people from the same sort of like working scene or working conditions or work setup, work environment. Maybe it's easy, but even with like the neighbors, people in the area where I live, I do not assume equality. I always see it as something that we have to look forward to. We have to allow each other to not only, yeah, like would my neighbor treat me equally because I have dogs, for example, or because in my age I don't have kids, for example, and or yeah, I mean these things I don't assume that. So in the day on a day-to-day basis, I think the main navigation is to make sure uh, equality is where people are heading to, are heading towards. We may never get there. I don't know if that answers Livy's question.
I want to raise an example of sort of a continual project. I think a continual project, maybe I'd like to think about it as a practice or life. That is the continual project. And sort of a very recent experience of mine where I've experienced a discursive move in a very experiential and physical way was in the 2019 Hong Kong sort of extradition law protests. That was a moment when justice became discursive. When what was justice is being contested in the form of bodies on the street. And whatever unfolded afterwards and still continues today. So I think that's that maybe is an example to sort of maybe think through how it doesn't necessarily have to abide by the kind of framework of within a curatorial artist project framework, but rather how we sort of inhabit the world around us. And how in tomorrow you may not be able to talk about this anymore.
Yeah. All right. I think we got to wrap up soon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think with this, sorry, I thought I was muted. I just want to thank everyone for showing up today. And I wonder if Cheetah or Rachel have further announcements, which also I forgot to mention. I would like to thank their work for this and also being curatorial assistants. And I'm sorry I forgot to also mention or give an introduction to them earlier. But Rachel and Cheetah will be with us through this whole journey and has been. And yeah, I'd like to know if you guys have further announcements, something that we could look forward to.
Yes. So I just have a list of people to thank, and I want to thank Sid and Michelle for agreeing to help us dig into the minds of curators and the curators as well for exposing the blog editors. And thank you everyone who joined us today on YouTube and here on Zoom. Thank you to Cheetah as well as the management team for helping us making this afternoon's event happen. Yeah, so announcement, I have some plug to mention. If you want to know even more about what's coming in Jakarta Biennale 2021 ESOK and what the curatorial team is brewing, we have a blog, blog.jakartabiennale.id. We are posting once a week, so make sure you check that out. Also, next month we are having another event, but it's going to be on Tuesday, 27th of April, 2021, and the time is going to be the same, so 2:30. More details will be published on our social media channels. Our Instagram is @Jakarta Biennale, as well as on our Facebook and YouTube page. Both is named Jakarta Biennale. That's it.
Thank Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Kita, Rachel, Sally, Chingy, Michelle, Sid,
See you all
Ari,
again soon.
Lily.
Thank
See you
you.
very soon.
See you, talk to you soon.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Bye, guys.